was, and I remember just thinking, like, who is this person? I'm so inspired by what she's talking about, what she's doing.
As Black women involved in community activism, we were just like, oh my gosh, this book speaks to us. We're making history now. Today we're making history in this conversation, you know.
It's so valuable that we document our history.
So stay curious, ask questions, and stay open.
Hi, my name is Nicole Crentsil, and I'm the founder and CEO of Black Girl Fest. Over the last couple of years, Black Girl Fest, we have been producing one of the UK's largest festivals for Black women, bringing together our community on a whole host of conversations and topics. Most recently, we operate as a studio where we work with young women and girls, producing incredible campaigns, programs, events, and opportunities that really connect with young Black girls and the future of the way in which we want our community to grow and flourish and thrive. Today, I have the huge honour to be welcoming Yvonne Field, who is a lifelong social activist, change agent, social entrepreneur, strategist, and campaigner. Wow. It is an honour to start this conversation talking about your background and learning a bit more about how your early years really shaped where you are today.
Well, Nicole, I've been a huge admirer of your work.
Thank you.
For a number of years. I've kind of, been on the sideline watching and just like, yeah, go girl.
Oh, thank you so much.
So this is really, it's a real delight for you to be in conversation with me this morning. So background and what shaped the work. Well, I come from a large family. There were 10 of us, 9 siblings. Originally my parents were from Jamaica. They came here in the 50s. And our home was always open. Even though there were 10 of us, there were always other children, young people
running around.
Yeah. My mother was one of the first Black foster mothers foster parents in Lewisham in the 60s. And also she was a day minder for children with disabilities. We had a child who was profoundly deaf, a child who was wheelchair bound. So in a way, this sort of community that we created in our home was very much part of what I was brought up with, the sense of community. And then at age 11, my parents took on the local education authority.
Wow.
I wasn't offered a place at the original grammar school that I applied for.
Yeah.
My mother was asked if she was a British citizen at the interview, but we did then with the head teacher. It was 1971. Which actually I only realised a few years ago that was the year that new Immigration Act came into place in the UK, which caused and was part of the cause of the Windrush scandal that made it, that it basically closed the doors to Black people, people from the Commonwealth. So we campaigned. I was homeschooled for 3 months. We took on the local authority. We used the media as it was then, the local newspapers, and we got Black students from Goldsmiths to teach me at home and 2 other Black girls. So we won that campaign. I didn't go to the first grammar school that I had applied for. I went to an even better one at the end, but I was homeschooled for 3 months and learnt that you could say no to the system, even though you didn't really maybe understand how it worked.
Yeah.
But you could mobilise people, you could advocate, you could write letters and you know, just really make some noise and say we're not accepting the decision.
Yeah.
So that kind of helped me really know that you could change your people's futures.
Yeah.
By working collaboratively and collectively and campaigning.
Yeah. What an incredible thing to learn at such a young age, to notice how powerful community can really shape the change that you wanted to see. And it's through facing direct discrimination with your inability to attend school. A privileged education that I think a lot of people probably would think, well, why couldn't she attend school? Do you think that kind of almost set the groundwork for your work in social cultural change?
Yeah, I think so.
That moment.
Because I think at 11, when my mother said to me, well, what do you want to do? She asked me, do you want to go to the schools that were left in terms of the opportunities, or do you want us to try and fight this? And I was like, I don't go to school, let's fight it. So I was like, hey, but then when my friends all started going off to their secondary schools in September, I was like, oh gosh, I've got no school to go to.
Yeah.
You know, so that felt a bit sort of lonely. And then of course, when I went to school in January, I had to then catch up. You know, I'd missed 3 months, and although I'd been homeschooled and introduced to Black history and sort of Black community activism, but still I'd missed the core curriculum, so I had a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah.
But certainly it shaped me. I think as I sort of went on, sort of early teens, being involved in I set up a youth club when I was 13. I think today my mother would have been dragged to social services, but then you could, we were able to do that. I had pen friends and travelled around to meet them and so on when I was 12 and 13. So I was quite a sort of free spirit and allowed to be that, actually. And so, that really sort of set my path. When I went to college, I was involved in student union activities and so on. So always a bit of a loudmouth and a bit of a leader from the front, really. But and I think the early years definitely shaped that. Get out there and do something.
Yeah,
want to change
and use
something.
Your voice as well.
Absolutely.
Which I think for many young Black women, especially like you mentioned, someone who comes from the generation Windrush, it's kind of like everything around you find is very diminishing, not giving you that voice. So to have that from such a young age is so powerful and really inspiring, especially in that era of that period in the UK. You mentioned your the Windrush generation and laws that were changing, the experiences for community, specifically you mentioned in Lewisham. I'd love to hear a bit more about kind of what your sentiments to the matter, because obviously you're directly linked with your own personal experience. But connected to the way the world is shaped and the way that we've seen how this generation has been treated, I wonder, what do you think more about the contributions that generation has made?
Gosh, that generation's made a huge contribution, which actually has been overlooked. It's like it didn't matter. They set the ground.
Just erased.
Yeah, exactly. That they did so much and continued through generations to do so much to really contribute to the fabric of this society, whilst also remaining really connected to communities that they came from in the Caribbean and Africa, and other parts of the Commonwealth, as they call it. So there was this sort of dual sort of, kind of support and, sort of investment happening. My mother used to send money home, my father did, to family members that were there, whilst they were raising families, working in communities. And actually, introducing, food, ways of being, ways of celebrating, the Black church, of course, and so on and so forth. Those things have really contributed to the fabric of this society. But it's all, that hard labour, and people were doing 2 and 3 jobs, frontline jobs and things, in areas. Yes, we talk about the NHS, we talk about the transport system, but actually people were working in factories and people were,
hard labourous jobs, the jobs that people didn't want to work in.
Absolutely, they were doing those and raising families and contributing to communities and supporting family back home and, and also, say, raising the next generation and the next generation. Because now I'm a great great aunt. I'm a great aunt here in the UK and in Jamaica. And so, sort of just thinking about sort of 4 generations of family that have come, since Windrush. And it's hard labour and it's just not, it's almost like we didn't make a contribution. And certainly the effect of the hostile environment, the impact of that is just like throw us to the curb.
Dismissal and erasure. And I think that's the dangers that we see in multiple ways that this country specifically continues to completely dismiss the contributions of this community and how it's shaped the fabric of this country today. Across culture, across work, across healthcare, so many areas of what makes the UK what it is off the backs of that generation.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a complete, let me not get into it. let me go. Whoa. Woo. You mentioned as well, it was part of your history, which I think is amazing, because I think, do you know the rapper Akala?
Yes, I know Akala.
Yeah, you probably know him very well. But he talked about the Saturday schools. He talked about his mum and dad taking him to these schools in order for him to learn about Black education. I think it's so wonderful. Supplementary schools, right?
Absolutely.
I would where are they right now, right? I would love to take my child to this. I mean, through the work that I do, to an extent, that work can continue. But the Saturday schools in particular, the ones that you experience being taught by Goldsmith students, activists, researchers, thinkers, I think is such a beautiful way to really educate children. And what we see now is quite academic and it's quite inaccessible and language that feels quite hard for people to compute, everyday people to compute. So I'd love to know just a bit more about where you feel like Saturday schools could exist in the world today.
Yeah, no, I think that they've got a really important role to play.
Mm.
First of all, they are a self-help, self-determined space that we've created to ensure that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren are grounded in their history and knowledge, and really, to help them understand when you're being taught history and English and mathematics that don't actually acknowledge who you are and where you come from and the contribution your people have made to the world. They are really important spaces for us to, we've obviously had them since the 60s. I do think they need an overhaul because my daughter went to a Saturday school, a supplementary school, and there is actually a national movement. There is actually a supplementary education network of all the supplementary schools that are in this country, which reaches all communities, minority communities.
Yeah.
A colleague of mine, his daughter is mixed heritage, both German and Nigerian. She goes to a German school. There are Jewish schools. There are schools that cater for the Asian communities and so on. The ones that cater for the African diaspora, I think, for our community, really, really important. As I was saying, they give, particularly grounding, new knowledge, a space to be where you don't have to explain who you are and why you're there and what that your cultural heritage, understanding of the history of mathematics and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
As I said, I do think they need a bit of an overhaul to ensure that they continue to grow and are part of our community infrastructure, because they are a space where often also older younger people can sort of step into communities and get involved in developing their communities and contributing, because it is a huge space for volunteering. And often we hear, you get sort of information saying, oh, Black people don't volunteer. That's not true at all. And I think the supplementary school movement that we've developed is a real repository for that kind of activity, and we need to develop it.
Yeah.
I think it should be part of our young people sort of transition, education and transition.
Yeah.
It needs to be part of the wider curriculum, like you might send your children dancing or to music lessons. They really do need to go to supplementary schools.
100% agree. I remember when I was reading, this was years ago, it was actually the book that pretty much shaped what the festival looked like. It was Heart of Race.
Oh yeah, Heart of the Race. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I have an old edition. Like my version is dusty, like it's finished.
Yes.
And I remember reading about Beverly Bryan, Soledadzi. I was super obsessed with the Black Arts movement in the UK. When my eyes opened to the fact that the Black Arts movement, Black Panther movement, wasn't just in the US, that there was a group of people in the UK, activists, who were up north, all over the country, who were having these conversations, using art as a means to talk about it. I was like, wow. Wow. My mind was blown. And that book pretty much made the core kind of framework of the way the festival was designed around health, art, creativity, all those elements were like, well, this needs to be documented and translated into a physical space. And I think it's so important for parents as well as for the next generation to see why this information is so valuable and culturally rich for multitudes of communities. I think it's something that we haven't maintained so well because so many have closed, right?
Yes.
But also I feel like with the generation that we have today who are very much online, they're reading and seeing political movements that are happening around the world. How do they educate themselves with literature, with information, with a lot of those activists are still alive today?
Yes, they are. Yes.
How do we celebrate them here and now? And I think that, like you said, an overhaul, a refresh needs to happen.
Yes.
A curriculum needs to be designed, or there needs to be a real attention to, maintaining those schools, but also the information that is being developed. Because I can imagine at that point, making those conversations as intersectional and bringing in multi-generations wasn't something that was being done then. But now it's like people care about that. People want to hear about multiple voices. So I'm really passionate about it myself. As a parent, a new parent, I'm just like, how will I teach my child about Black history, African history, education? Because it's not going to happen in traditional schooling systems and institutions. So where will I give that information to my child? How will she better understand who she is by people's past? So it's something that I just truly believe, like, I remember actually Googling like, where are the supplementary schools in North London to
yes.
try and like see what I can support, volunteer, offer services, resources, because it's something that I genuinely believe it's something that's really important, especially in this country.
Well, I'm really delighted to hear that it was Heart of the Race. That was because it came out in the 80s originally. Yeah, it was one of, like, as Black women involved in community activism, we were just like, oh my gosh, this book speaks to us. It's our book, about us and our stories. In fact, when I started getting involved in community development after I'd gone and trained up in Birmingham to do youth and community work, the first job that I got was actually setting up Lambeth Girls and Young Women's Project. And I mean, that was actually, it was around until about probably 10 years ago it closed down.
Okay.
And that was working with Black girls and young women in Lambeth, providing arts and crafts. And we went on many residentials and did things like carpentry and photography and all sorts.
Amazing.
And also we did a lot of women youth worker gathering across London. And out of that, there was a group of Black women youth workers called OBE. In fact, it was Asian and African women, and then the group split, and it was predominantly African women that kept meeting, working on resources for Black girls and young women. And we're still, all of those women are in our 60s now. I'm one of the younger of the group, and we are still very connected. Those are my daughter's aunties and my sister, and who've been, and all involved in communities in some way, shape, or form since the 80s. Yeah. Actually, the archives from Lambeth Girls Projects are actually in the Lambeth archives, all the work that we've done still there. And I think there's something about trying to kind of connect some of the dots, kind of connect some of what we've done, because, one of the things that I'm passionate about trying to see if we can develop is a model around community development that's actually from here by us, not from the States, imported, because actually we've done bodies and bodies of work over decades. Yeah. And actually it's kind of a bit disparate. We haven't created so this is how we might do these things. So I'm really glad to hear that Black Girls Fest was drawn from, the Heart of the Race. Yeah. And
definitely.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. So
Well, feminist literature is what really shaped even my kind of unearthing of like, what am I doing here? As someone who was born in Ghana, immigrated to the UK, experienced so much racism. Yes. I was constantly trying to search for a place to fit in. I was assimilating into a culture that didn't want me. Yes. So a lot of my core practice was trying to find communities of people who felt that same experience and bringing them together in a space to actually see ourselves being more celebrated. Yeah. So really, I wanted to understand, like, well, I wasn't the first one to ever feel like this in the UK. Yes. Where are the other women, and how have they expressed that through art and creativity, and through programming? And so that's kind of where that core work really comes from. And that work still is much needed.
Totally. It really is needed. Absolutely. Yeah. No, sure.
Yeah. You mentioned about your kind of work history, and I won't get into all of it because it's like over 40 years, but I would love to know, you mentioned as well previously that you've traveled a lot through your work. Tell me a bit more about your experiences with traveling and how seeing other communities, seeing the ways in which other institutions or networks have created, how has that really impacted the work that you do now?
So I was fortunate, I think, in my mid-20s, because I was offered a post, an international post with the Commonwealth Secretariat when I was 26 26, I think I was. And so I went to the Caribbean. I was based in Guyana, and my patch was the English-speaking Caribbean. So I had, I think, 14, 15 English-speaking countries, and islands and countries that I covered. And we ran a Caribbean-wide diploma in youth and community work. And then we ran lots of workshops and did policy development and research with the Caribbean governments. So, I mean, at times, initially I felt a bit fish out of water, because I've been born and brought up in South London, and there I was in Guyana, a Black woman of Caribbean origin, but never been to the Caribbean before. Right. So it was kind of complicated at times, but I found some anchor families, new families, who kind of helped me find, exactly, which was really important. But actually, what was really exciting about the work that I was able to do then, and it was teaching, and I say it was research and policy and so on, was to understand sort of and be exposed to some of the issues that affect young people, which actually were global issues. So unemployment, teenage pregnancy, not completing school and the impact of that. So those kind of things, which actually I said are universal, but just kind of being able to make the connections, but also being connected to Black people and being in the Caribbean, not being the only Black in the space, was just like look around and think, oh gosh, I'm a majority here, and what that did for my sense of being and confidence, and also being able to see some of the many of the similarities between the island life. And also some of the differences, because Guyana's obviously in South America. So I felt that I spent nearly 3 years there.
Wow.
And then I came back and to university. However, it really stood me in good stead, because I was able to move, from here to another country on my own. And although I worked within an institution, just to be, as a young person, being able to sort of, make life in another country and to thrive. So it did a lot around independence. And then a second piece of travel that I did, which I think was completely life-changing, I'm a Churchill Fellow. So in 2011, I applied to the Churchill Trust. And yes, we know that Churchill has a very checkered history, and I think the institution has had done some deep thinking about that. And it's one of the only opportunities available in the UK for individual travel.
Okay.
So I had a sense earlier in the year, early 2011, that something was bubbling. It was gut. It was not empirical. It was not thought through. It was just like something seemed to be moving in communities. And so I sat down in August 2011 and wrote an application to the Churchill Trust to look at two things: Black community leadership in Atlanta, and to look at those that were involved in the civil rights movement, as well as the young leaders who are involved in activism then, and to go to New Zealand and spend time with the Maori community, and to look at community enterprise. And that was in 2012. I was awarded. I was fortunate because, there's over 1,000 applications each year. There's about 100 up to 150 awards are made. But actually what happened 4 days after I sent it in, before the close date, we had uprisings in Tottenham, and they were. I
was just about to say, 2011.
Yeah, exactly. So everything sort of just was, kicked off, and it was horrendous what had happened, but also the government response was just shocking.
Equally as bad.
It was really, really bad.
Mark Duggan,
yeah, absolutely, with Mark Duggan, and the murder, his murder. So I went off. I didn't go until 2013. I was given, because my mother passed in 2011, and it was just difficult because myself and my daughter, we lived with her, and so it took me a couple of years, but they were completely flexible. So I spent 2 weeks in Atlanta and 3 weeks in New Zealand, and that helped me kind of begin to scope Ubele. I'd kind of had a seed of an idea, and I went there and I was like, well, I've got this idea about Black leadership and community sustainability. And they were like, well, what's it about? And I was like, well, I'm not really sure. But it was like, are you connected to health? No, I'm not connected to health. Are you connected to education? No, I'm not connected to education. It's like, okay, but this is the idea. And they kind of backed it.
Yeah.
They backed it. And so it was life-changing. I think spending time with the Maori community, so many similarities to communities in South Africa, because I spent a lot of time in South Africa as well over the last 30 years. And it was just, I was welcomed. I was absolutely welcomed with open arms. Family, wanu, as they say in Maori. I was embraced as family, and just was able to move between different Maori communities and to learn about enterprise in quite northern rural, quite poor communities where a Maori community live. And then in America, I was able to hang out with some awesome people who'd made magical contributions to the civil rights movement. I was just sitting at the feet of giants. And then also to go and spend time with the younger generation who are involved in building communities now. So that was, there's lots of things that I've done. I've been to Japan, I've been to China, I've been to Bali, I've been to East Timor, I've been to sort of and of
Well
course,
traveled. Yeah.
and the Caribbean. But I think those kind of experience, the Caribbean and the Churchill Fellowship, sort of stand out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In driving that, I think it's so powerful, and I think it's truly important to see the connections that activism and oppressions or forms of oppression, they interconnect with so many other communities. Absolutely. On a global scale. Yeah. I know that Lavinia from Black Curriculum,
yes,
it was her experience also in New Zealand that led her to turn back and be like, why is there not a Black curriculum in the UK? Yes. And I think that would have only have happened if she went to New Zealand. She had that experience there. And I think that's where we see, like, wow, open our eyes to the opportunities, as you mentioned, with Ubele, which I'd love to talk about a bit more. You are the founder and CEO of Ubele Initiative. Tell us a bit more about the inception, the desire to create this work. I'd love to hear from your words.
Yeah, no, sure. So there's a bit of a backstory to it, really, because I ran a consultancy business from the mid-1990s, really, till about 2011, 12, in essence. So I started, and I was teaching at Goldsmiths. I've taught at Goldsmiths in two tranches. Mm-hmm. First time was 4.5 years. The second time was just over 6 years. I was there sort of 3 days a week and 2 days a week. Mm-hmm. But whilst I was doing that, both times, actually, I was setting up my own enterprise. The first time was my own consultancy business. Second time was Ubele. Yeah. So I kind of went full circle both times. It's really weird that way. I ended up back at Goldsmiths the second time. But whilst I was running my business, and I was full-time from 2020, I set up a company. Before that, I was part-time self-employed. Yeah. And I had, I grew a business. I learned, because I come from a family of entrepreneurs. 8 of the 10 of us run our own businesses. Amazing. I'm the only one in the social space. And then also the next generation, my daughter, nieces and nephews, all entrepreneurs. It's beautiful to see. Yeah. The highs and the lows. Yeah. So I learned to run a business. I just want to keep myself full-time employed when I left local authority in 95. So I was running my business, grew it, had lots of staff, associates, similar to Ubele. But then I went through a bit of a life change, and I thought I didn't want to do what I was doing as I was doing it, how I was doing it, because I did a second master's degree in change agency skills and strategies at Surrey University, and learning to sort of new tools, new concepts, new processes around facilitating change. Most people on the program went through a life change as well. It kind of, be careful what you wish for kind of thing. You want the tools, and then it's like, I need to take with my own life. So I decided to slowly but surely close the consultancy down, but met a group of people who were based in South Africa and the UK called Rios Partners. And here in the UK, and then more latterly in the South Africa, worked with them. They have a way of working and methodologies which kind of ask you to, or suggest that if you want to change somebody, like, what's the proposition, what's the question that you're holding? Yeah. So like you could say, like a wicked problem, So I worked with them for a while as an associate and a partner, actually. And then I realised that I had a question about Black communities in the UK. And that question was, well, okay, our parents came here to the UK. Most migrants desire to go home. They're here for a period of time. The kind of proverbial story about Windrush generation was that we came for 5 years and we were going home. That was plan A. Well, once you have children, you've got your baby, got a home that you've bought, you've spent more years here working, it's like plan A is not quite going to work out. Yeah. So my question was, what's plan B? Yeah. And given that my family's 4 generations now, I was like, this is home to many of just the people in my family group, given that we're 10, even though we kind of move between. And in fact, my family is my sister spent 35 years in Nigeria. My other sister's been in Ghana for the last 17 years, and she's there. My nephew's in South Africa, and I've been in South Africa for on and off for the last 30 years. So we're quite African continent focused. Yeah. But we're still very much got roots here as well as Jamaica. So it's like plan A didn't work. What's plan B? How do we ensure that the roots that we have here are deep and strong and sustainable and generative? And what are we doing about that? Yeah. Have we got a plan? what's the big plan really?
Yeah.
So that was kind of taxing me for a while. So I started getting into conversations with people in South London where I was living at the time, where I was born and brought up. I now live in North, but I'm South Londoner at heart.
At heart.
And so it was like, so what are you noticing? What are we not attending to?
Yeah.
So we were just having lots of gatherings once a month. A random group of people come together and talk and talk and talk, and say, well, what about our older people? Given that we were going to go home, this is now home. How are we going to care for each other? What's our care needs? And also with the young people at the other end of the spectrum, we know we've got so much evidence about what's happening to them, but what could be some really interesting, important and foundational new interventions?
Yeah.
We know mentoring programs are there, but what else do we need?
Yeah.
So we spent 3 years in those informal conversations, just me gathering people and saying, let's have a chat for a couple of hours. What do you notice? And eventually there were a number of things, but we focused on the next generation of leaders. So because we found that our leaders are my age and older. I sit on the shoulders of amazing women like Mavis Best and Sybil Phoenix, who are 80 and 90 and some have passed, of course. And so it was like, we need a new generation of community leaders because those women in particular have done their work. I'm thinking, where am I going? I've got to get out of this space as well in the next few years.
You've got to pass the torch.
Yeah, pass the torch, pass the baton.
Yeah.
As well as we were here in those iconic spaces that we had, that they secured, worked hard to build, that we were losing them because of gentrification and communities, changing and being pushed out.
Yeah.
As a result of development and developers and planners.
Yeah.
So that was a genesis, the kind of life change, the curiosity, working with other people, kind of feeling that I had a question. And the wicked question I had was, what do we need to do as Black African diaspora people to become sustainable in the UK, even though we are diaspora and we're global, but we need to focus here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what will happen to us?
Yeah. I think that's it's so true, definitely for my generation. I started around 2016 with this work. I started with an exhibition called Unmasked Women, and it was around having conversations about mental health and Black women. And it was around the time where people weren't really talking about mental health. And it was through my experiences of other artists and creatives that I brought together. My first time ever programming anything, ever curating any exhibition. I was working full time and doing it. I just wanted to have this conversation. And it was also around the time where other community collective groups, zines, whatever you wanted to call them, were also starting. Geldem being one of the most brilliant examples of that. And I remember, I never forget, I was in the bus to work, and I opened Time Out, and there was Liv Little's Bald Head. Yeah, you live. And it was, and I remember just thinking, like, who is this person? I'm so inspired by what she's talking about, what she's doing, starting this zine from university and growing into a business. And unfortunately, Geldem is no longer around. And I think so much about, like, if my child, my next generation, has access to this sort of storytelling, narrative writing, community events, exhibits, whatever, how much of a loss that is, that platforms and communities and businesses can't still exist to this day. And I will keep talking Geldem's name until the cows come home, because I feel like that oral history is still needed, that physical history, that archiving. I've got every single issue of that magazine in case 20 years time someone wants to do an exhibition. I've got my archive which I can lend. But it's because I think it's so valuable that we document our history, even to this day, when I see people producing really powerful discourse and conversations, I'm like, put the year on your poster.
Absolutely, please. I always say
put the year on that poster.
Absolutely. I write on the back of postcards when I go places, like what date I went there, because you turn it over and there's nothing, and you're like, where does this? So when did this happen? Yeah, absolutely.
As someone who loves archiving, I'm gonna need this.
Absolutely,
I want to keep this
in
my file of facts.
Yes.
I don't know what year this is.
No, you need to put the year on it
all the time. And I think it's another way in which I genuinely feel like, when it comes to documenting our history, our work, our contributions, like the fact that you can say your work sits in Lambeth Council, how do we archive and document what's going on in this generation? And like you said, passing the torch to the next leaders, giving that knowledge, the book, the resources, the understanding to the next generation. How do we even find them? Who are they? How do we support them?
True.
And I think that's something that our generation need to work in tandem with the work that your generation has created over the numerous of years of which you've been doing this activism, this work. And I think the Ubele Initiative is a brilliant way to do exactly that.
Yeah. And I'm a bit of a family archivist as well. I've got the family tree. I make sure when we gather, we take the group photo. I make sure that everybody, all the new children of family are on there. Any marriages, any passing of people, just get it done.
Document it, yeah.
Because, and I wrote in our newsletter this last month of Black History Month, because it was Reclaiming Narrative, wasn't it? That actually, because my parents just came with their, individual suitcases, I don't have anything from grandparents. I don't have an image. I don't have anything. So I feel, like we're making history now. Today we're making history in this conversation, So it's like, how can we just make sure that everything we do, we just kind of realize that others are going to come to us, come after us, and they need to know. They deserve to know, what we did. So, yes, I think what we did in Ubele, because it's actually, although we formally launched in 2014, and then, and we've kind of been working slowly to build the organisation. I was, up until 4 years ago, still teaching at Goldsmiths. So that was my main day job until COVID hit. But we've done a few things, and this is our 10th anniversary officially this year.
Amazing.
In May.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So what we've done is a few things. We've produced, back in 2016, I actually got someone to do a sort of plant and ended up putting our key milestones on that. But then we produced a timeline on a river from 2011, when I wrote my big question. 2010, actually, I wrote my big question. 2011, I wrote the concept note for Ubele. But we've kind of captured the key milestones on a really lovely sort of, I'm going like this because it was a huge banner we did it on for our 10th anniversary, but also we created it in hard copy, fold out sort of long river with all those key, and we use a lot of graphic harvesting, so it's kind of really nicely created. And then we've also created a time capsule. Because we haven't talked about the work we do in communities specifically, but because we have a 3.5 acre growing space in Wood Green, we were able to, in the Garden of Memory, put a time capsule, and we've put in, and we haven't yet sealed, but we've got it in the ground in a box that will last forever. Wow. All our foundational documents, where we've been referenced in other books, where we've written articles, just everything and it's to be opened in 2100.
Whoa.
About 80 years.
Wow.
Time. So, and we are beginning to work with someone to create some more formal archives of our work. Because, yes, it's like, who were these people? What did they do? What did they contribute? It kind of gets lost in the ether when it's really, really tough work, as you know, day to day, to create something from scratch and to grow it. The time capsule is part of our 10th anniversary contribution.
I love that. I think that's a beautiful way to celebrate your work and also to leave something for the next generation to discover.
Yes.
Wow, that's a really, really great idea. I love that. Yeah, that's really powerful.
Thank you.
I'd love to know, for anyone watching and for any Black woman who's inspired by the work that you've done over the years, but equally, I guess, with the work that you're celebrating now, this 10 years, what advice would you give for younger Black women and the work, and you've done a lot of youth work as well, myself similar, what advice would you give for younger Black women who are equally also maybe hypothesizing the same question that you did 10 years ago? Where would you tell them to go? What would you give them advice to do in terms of their own journey with their social activism?
What just popped into my head was, I think advice would be, learn to lead, but also learn to follow, because leaders need followers.
Yeah.
But also, when I followed women, I'm not going to talk about our men, our brothers today. I'm going to talk about our women, because I'm really inspired to see yourself and 3 other young women here today curating this. It's just, my heart sings.
Oh, take your time.
Because I know that our future is safe.
Yeah.
And I know that our work will continue. It's continuing.
Yeah.
So I feel very yeah, just so touched, as you can see,
Yeah.
that you're doing the work that needs to be done in your own way,
Yeah.
in your own style, and you're doing the work. So I would suggest that be curious, stay open, You know, the world can be magical. It can be all sorts of other things as well, but magic can happen, and it does.
Yeah.
So stay curious, ask questions, and stay open.
Yeah.
Yeah, stay open. Now I'm messing up my lovely makeup. Sahara did. Thank you. Oh, thank you. No.
You look amazing. Don't
Oh,
worry.
you know.
It's your appreciation is palpable. Like I can feel the true. And I say this as well because I always say all the work that we're doing, my generation is doing that. It's off the back of the shoulders of your generation. Nothing we're doing is new and amazing and exciting. It's literally like I literally took the learnings from this book and said, this is what was going on 50, 60 years ago. It's still happening.
Yes.
What work can I do now with all the digital tools that I have access to? So I always say, like, nothing that we're doing in this generation is new and fresh and different. It's all just iterations of what has happened in the past, and of the art, the creativity, the programming, the ways in which people were gathering without the internet and without, you know, communities were being built without social media platforms. And I think that we have so much to learn from how grassroots DIY cultures were creating powerful spaces with little to no funding or initiative. It was just people coming together. And I think that the piece of advice that I would equally give, I'm such an obsessive person when it comes to reimagination. I love what you said about curiosity, because I always feel like as women specifically, reimagining our better future is where I feel like that real innovation can take place.
Totally.
And I always encourage young people that I work with to be like, just take this all apart and start together again. Like, how would you reimagine the way that the world works, whether it's the education system or whether it's healthcare or housing? What would you do if you were the one who was to be at the core of the way the system's being designed? Because we know that we haven't been included in the many institutions and structures that currently exist in the UK today. So equally, it empowers and emboldens young girls to feel like, well, maybe I should try and execute that. Maybe we should try and find a way to do something about this issue, but reimagine from the lens of a young Black girl. And I think that more women need to see the power in reimagining better futures and being curious and asking questions and inquiring and being unafraid to speak up and say, that doesn't make any sense. Why does the world work that way? Why can't we do something about it? And how can we do something about it? And I definitely feel like we're hopefully the generation after me, Gen X or Y or Z, are more inquisitive because they're not going to stick around for this stuff.
No, they're not.
They're over it.
My daughter's like, Mum, Gen Z, they're like just not, they're just so different to millennials. So, you know, it's like, they are just not having it.
No.
Absolutely. So no. Just to pick up on something that you said and then to come back to your question, you know, a very good friend of mine who passed away about 5 years ago, when I went to see her and she knew she was dying. She gave me a document that I had lost. I hadn't seen it. It was written in 1984, and it was a 4-week program that I'd put together for Black girls and young women with a group of Black women youth workers. Yeah. And when I read that document, I thought, what the hell has changed? Nothing. We were talking about not being included in spaces. We were talking about the experience of going places and experiencing racism. And I was just like, we were talking about lack of resources. I said, and it was it'd been typed on a typewriter, right? So it was like, and I just thought, this is just, I just felt shocked. It could have been written today.
It could have been written by your daughter who'd handed it right back to you, but like, oh, this is lovely. And it's like, wait, I wrote this. Like,
it was,
many years ago.
It was quite shocking that was our experience. I would have been 24 then.
Wow.
In 1984. I did that.
Wow.
And wrote that. So, but to come back to your question around, you know, sort of advice to younger Black women, I think you said something about boldness, and I think just, you know something, if you hold your vision, if you hold your vision, you know, I've realised as I've got older, I always think my mother was a bit of a witch when I was a child, because you'd always know
everything.
Like,
I mean, with so many kids, right?
Something had been moved. You're like, who moved that? We're like, what? Fess up, come on, who did move? Like, you know, and she'd know things before you could even speak them. She would know.
Yeah.
And now I know how she knows. Yeah, just in terms of women's intuition.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm quite good, I think, at sort of seeing. My third eye is quite developed, so I can see things and visualize them, and then I don't know how some things are going to be created. It's a bit like, again, talking about my mum, you know, when she'd give me a recipe, say to make curry goat or something, I'd say, Mum. In fact, I bought a recipe book to write things down. When she passed, it was empty. She never wrote a thing in that recipe book. But I'd ring her up and she'd say, okay, do this and this and this. And I'd say, okay, fine, go away and do it. And then she'd ring me back and say, oh, did I tell you to put in? And I'm like, no, and now it's finished. And it's like, you know, so, but actually, and I'd say, how much of something? How much, Mum? How much sugar or flour or whatever? Say, just judge it. Just judge it. I didn't know what that meant exactly. And now I make things and I just judge it. Right? And it just comes up.
Just perfect.
You just know your sense of what needs to be added. And I think when you're envisaging something to happen, yes, you need to do certain things. We know that. But actually, your instinct and your intuition guides you, you know. So, you know, go there, go and talk to that person. Or sometimes things just land, you know. I've got to write some essays, some interviews I've got to edit next week. I'm going on a writing retreat. And I was looking for something this morning, and then I found an article that I'd completely forgotten about Ubuntu leadership. I thought, I need that.
Yeah.
I need that for the next week.
Yeah.
And it just landed. I was looking, and I thought, what an incredible piece, you know, resource I had at my fingertips. But sometimes people just send you things.
Yeah.
You know, I've had a lot of grief in the last 3 years. I've lost 3 significant people. And 2 people this week have said, Yvonne, have you considered grief counselling? And one actually said, I've been thinking about you for 18 months. She's not spoken to me. And when she called me on Wednesday, and I said, look, apart from my brother passing, my former partner passed and our younger brother passed. And she said, I can give you grief counselling. I can arrange for someone to give you. And I was like, somebody else told me that yesterday. So this is like affirmation. I have to do this sometime in the future when I'm ready.
Yeah.
So resources and opportunities and offers land, yes, if you keep on your vision.
Yeah.
And I'd also say be generous. Generosity, you know, and it's not about, you know, money, although that can help sometimes.
Yeah.
But actually, you know, if you've got contacts and networks, offer them to people. Share them. You know, as they say, don't pull the ladder up behind you, but share them, because actually, I know people have been really generous towards me.
Yeah.
And they're generous towards my daughter. Yeah. And it just, you know, just kind of, you know, I know it sounds a bit cliched, but
no, it doesn't.
But, you know,
our generation called don't gatekeep. Don't gatekeep.
Exactly.
Share the resources. There's enough to go around. There's no competition.
Abundance.
Like generally, like more of us need to exist doing this work in social justice or entrepreneurial creativity, community building. I genuinely agree with the same sentiment. It's like more of us should be doing this as opposed to just one person, because it's a huge amount of responsibility on that individual person. As much as you think that they're living the life, then they're not. They're struggling, having to carry the weight of this work. When actually, if it was distributed, and like you said, they shared, oh, this is how I did it. So you should do it too. So there's more of us doing this, and then we'll actually reach the end mission a lot sooner, a lot quicker, and then we can retire and go back to Jamaica.
Exactly, absolutely.
Isn't that what we want?
The women that I've, you know, stayed close to for 40 odd years, we were women youth workers. I worked across London and they were working in London boroughs, and they are in their 60s and they have done their work, and we've walked beside each other. You know, some are creatives, musicians, artists, you know, sort of mathematicians, but involved in community. I mean, it's just an awesome group. It's about 10 of us still. Amazing. Really connected. And we did that foundational work and continue to contribute to communities in different ways. You know, and so, there's more than enough space and opportunities for everyone.
Everyone, really. We've got to do something and bring that community together.
Oh, please.
We need to give you guys your flowers and just continue to learn. Like, we need to have an intergenerational, like, make it happen. We need to have an intergenerational community event. I remember I went to university in Nottingham. I spent 4 years there. It was amazing. And I was so obsessed with getting connected with Nottingham's community groups and the arts movements that were happening in the 80s across like Wolverhampton and all these beautiful spaces. And I had the amazing opportunity to work very closely with a lot of the pioneers of the Black arts movement. And I couldn't believe I was in this room. I was working with Nottingham Contemporary Gallery, and there was a covening of various different cultural workers. And I remember thinking, like, this is incredible. Like, I'm actually sat in the same room as like Stella Dadzi and like all these Sonia Boyce. And I was just like, how did I get here? Like, this is incredible. And like, there's only other, like, one, I've been reading about them. 2, they're still alive. 3, they're in my presence, and I can actually actively ask them questions and learn from them in this celebratory event celebrating Black arts movements. Like, that would have never have happened if I didn't choose to go to Nottingham for university and then stay connected to the communities that were there. So I generally think that that continuous learning and sharing environment is so needed, because again, like I said, generations that are coming after us don't know that this work, this data, this information, these programs existed before us. And actually what you're creating isn't entirely new, but you can learn from the mistakes of the past, and you also can learn from the successes to build out what you envision is like the next version of the way that this work continues to thrive, really.
Absolutely. No, totally. And I mean, those people that sort of were the pioneers, you know, and then who said, give them their flowers. Which I didn't understand what the term was until the other day.
Really?
I kind of thought, oh, where's the flowers then? I'm not joking.
Get the bouquet in.
But no, it was beautiful. I mean,
it's a beautiful sentiment, right? It's like, give you your flowers whilst you're still here.
Absolutely.
And see, like, have those people recognize that their work means something.
It's made
years on. You don't have to wait 100 years. You don't have to wait for a biography. You don't have to wait for a huge major exhibition.
A funeral. Don't have to wait for a funeral.
Exactly.
You hear about all the things this person did. You're like, why did we not know that?
Why did we not know this? Like 60, 70 years of this person's history. And it's like, they've done so much to contribute to communities. Like, where's the statue? Like, where is the exhibition? Where is the honor? And I think that the generations that are now popping up and people who are creating stuff or want to create stuff, they really need to kind of continue to learn from the OG, the pioneers, the change makers, people who are doing this in kind of worse systems and territories, whether it being pressures from the police, pressures from the government, lack of support. Like, we actually have access to far more now. And I think it's important for us to look back at what has been done in the past before we try to go ahead without that knowledge. I think it's what I did and what's kind of let me continue to develop my practice. And I think others who are coming into the space equally need to kind of shift into that space as well. I'd like to wrap up soon, hopefully, as we're leaning towards the end of this conversation, and talk a bit more about legacy and your vision. We're celebrating 10 years. Congratulations. It's incredible. Love the idea of the time capsule and capturing this work and leaving it for generations to come. When you reflect on your career and advocacy, what legacy do you hope to leave for future generations?
Well, you know, some of the work we're doing at the moment with Ubele is about community wealth building. So what we're trying to do, and I hope will be part of my legacy, is to ensure that there's a new generation of spaces, community spaces for the next generation, for this and the next generation. So we've got our own space. Amazing. It's a 3.5 acre food growing space. We've just built 3 phenomenal eco buildings on that space.
I need to come.
Please come and visit. And we host some things there because we've got a community hub, we've got classroom, we've got offices, and we've got, well, Elsie will say, I know Elsie over here who put this together. Thank you, Elsie.
Thank you.
We've got glass houses and cactus house and farmhouse and cafe and stuff. An amazing space in North London. So I'm hoping the work that we're doing is to help, at the moment, about 30 organisations around the country to develop the spaces that they have.
Amazing.
For future generations. So that, hopefully, if that initiative, which really has come out of 2 foundational pieces of research, A Place to Call Home 1 and A Place to Call Home 2, they were done in 2015 and 2023, and then sort of building that narrative and the work
Yeah.
around community assets and sustainable community spaces.
Yeah.
But for me, I suppose my legacy is about the impact that I have on people. Yeah, and that hopefully some of the time that I spend with people, some of the learning opportunities,
Yeah.
some of the mentoring, coaching, and just kind of, I suppose, being around me really in terms of what, the ways. Yeah, because I know that some of the women that I've been around, as I mentioned earlier, that, their spirit and their wisdom and their just the tenacity is in me. My mother being a foundational woman in my life that's kind of influenced and informed me and left her legacy.
Yeah.
But also the women I've met in communities. I want to write more.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going on a writing retreat next week, but I hope to, in fact, I've collected stories, collected 30 stories with two younger women. We collected those of women on the front line, women of colour on the front line during COVID.
Okay.
On the front line of community. So that book is to be published.
Amazing.
Got a lot of work still to do, but that will happen. And then also I want to write the book that will be probably edited with a number of contributors about the work that Ubele's done on community development.
Yeah.
Out of which really we want to develop a model.
Okay.
We want to create a model that
a framework.
A typology, about so that we can kind of leave that. And that could be taught in universities all over the world and, here, and can be used to build communities in this country and others. So those are some of the things that I hope are my legacy.
Amazing.
And,
not big.
No.
They're just a few small things.
And, I mean, often you don't know the impact that you've had. It's really weird. We run a course called Elevate, which is for women of colour in 6 universities in the southwest of England.
Okay. And
it's Bristol University commissioned us in 2020. And we've run it. We're going into Elevate 5 now. We've run 4 programs, and Elevate 3. We run, it was all online the first year because it was COVID, but now we increasingly do sessions in person and then online. So when we had the first online session of Elevate 3, we meet in this big house, and there's all sorts of courses happening on that day. It's the engineer's house in Bristol. And there was a black woman that I bumped into in the house, and she said, "Oh, what course are you on?" I said, "What?" We weren't on the same program. So she said, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, it's a." She said, "Oh, can I?" I said, "Well, you're not from one of the universities." She followed me into the room anyway, and was looking at the women that were gathering, and she said, "I want to be here." She said, and then somebody called me, and she said, "Oh, what's your name?" I said, "Yvonne Field." She said, "Oh my goodness," she said, "I'm a Churchill Fellow because of you."
Oh.
She said, "I heard you say on some platform you were on that you're a Churchill Fellow."
Okay.
I looked it up and
applied.
And I got it.
Oh.
And I said, "Look at that. You followed me around this building, determined to get on this course," which of course you didn't come on. But actually there was a reason, the connection.
Yeah.
And so in a way, yes, you sometimes just don't know the impact that you have and what you leave with people because, she said, "I heard you say that." I was like, "Oh, this is phenomenal."
Yeah.
That actually you acted on that and you got an opportunity to change your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's inspiring, honestly. I think that it shows you, when you talked about your legacy wanting to be with people, it shows you exactly why that is, like the impact that you have on people and the steps that they can take to follow behind you to grow their practice and to have access to their own opportunities. I think it's just really powerful. And I totally agree in the investment in spaces. Like I'm a true believer. I call it the BB. Basically, it's black bricks and mortar.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think more spaces, we need to have more physical spaces, black owned spaces, run, whether it's cafes, whether it's photo studios, whether it's like art spaces. I remember when I was reading about in Finsbury Park, the first black art gallery that was created.
Yes, I've heard about
and the
that.
issues that it had with like funding, and then the council, and then, it had some funding and the funding was pulled and it had to close. And I just kept thinking, like, how amazing if this space still existed to this day as a point of contact, information, resource activations for artists graduating, artists that were kind of developing their practice, to know that this piece of history actually exists in Finsbury Park. So I'm just like, where is this? Where are these spaces? I'm a true believer in that. We have our own space with Black Girl Fest in Bethnal Green, which is amazing. Great. I signed another 2-year lease. So I was like, let's just do this again for another 2 years. Do you know what I mean? I think I'm more invested in not losing it and not having a space for our community than I am about anything else. And I think it's because I want a space for young people or future generations to be able to know that this is where this work existed. This is where all these amazing ideas were created. And this is where the community can kind of gather and convene and connect and learn. So what you're doing in Wood Green is amazing. I'm absolutely going to come in and be in those plants, those trees, those wood. Yeah, let me get involved. If you need a hand, I'm there to volunteer.
Please, do. We'd love to have you. I mean, the other thing is that we have set up a housing cooperative as well.
Okay.
And, you know, so that will be part of my legacy. Gida Housing. We're in the process of negotiating for 58 flats on St Anne's Hospital site.
Okay.
It's been a long journey, as you can imagine.
Yes.
But we're going to have 2 blocks at 2026 and 2029.
Wow.
And so that will be a whole community. We're working with Ubele, Filipino community, and also Latin American community.
Okay.
So we've set up a new company, which is Gida. So there'll be bricks and mortar there.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations. Honestly, it's been a huge honor to have this conversation with you, Yvonne. Like your history, I feel as inspired by the similar activists, historians, writers, thinkers that I've read about, hearing about your story and sharing it with the world. I think it's a huge honor to sit down with you and to talk about your trajectory, your history, and in the future, hopefully to continue to give you your flowers and to celebrate not just the 10 years, but the over 40 years of the work that you've been doing to create the groundworks for a lot of us who want to do in a similar fashion. So thank you so much for sitting down with me and for sharing your story and your ambitions and advising us, myself, I'm still young, I'm not that old, about what we can do to really steer the future for our communities. So it's a huge honor.
No, the honor's mine as well, Nicole. I said I've admired your work and just keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
You know, it's needed, it's amazing, it's part of our history. So, and thank you for taking the time to have this conversation with me.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay.